Good afternoon and welcome to the Small Business Briefing put on by the Small Business Association of Michigan. I have the pleasure of leading this organization. My name is Brian Calley, President and CEO.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Sarah Miller with SBAM, and I would love to say thank you to our sponsor, Consumers Credit Union. I do hope you'll take a couple of minutes and visit consumerscu.org to learn more about how they can help your small business. So we have quite a list of things to cover today. The first of which is related to adopt and amend. Brian, what's the update with that adopt and amend issue?
Yeah, this is the issue with minimum wage and paid sick leave mandated requirements. There was a compromise passed in 2018 that later on, years later, that was challenged in court, and essentially it would overnight cause some pretty big increases to minimum wage and institute for all businesses, including small businesses, minimum paid sick leave required to be segregated out from other types of leave. So big changes. We have been trying to preserve the status quo, preserve what has already been in law since 2018, and that's working its way through the court system. We won at the Court of Appeals, and then the opposition is appealing it to the state Supreme Court. So the state Supreme Court has not decided yet whether to hear it. So there's two potential steps here. The first is for us in a coalition that we are working with to weigh in with an amicus brief to the state Supreme Court saying, don't take this up. Let the Court of Appeals decision stand. The 2018 compromise has worked well since then. It was passed in a legal and rightful fashion, and so leave it be. So that's what our amicus brief said. It made the case that the appellate court made the right decision, and there's no reason for the state Supreme Court to take it up. So if they take our advice or say yes to our request, what they'll be doing is saying that the status quo remains, and they're not going to review changing the appellate court. Now, if they decide to take it up anyway, decide to take up the case anyway, it doesn't mean that we lost. It just means that there's another day in court, and at that point, all the interested parties would weigh in, and then the Supreme Court would have to make a decision based on whatever facts and merits of the case were brought. We don't think there's really anything new to bring to the case. It was the case was made at the Court of Appeals in a very robust way, and so the Supreme Court ought to be able to endorse that decision. So no real timetable that I could lay out in terms of, they don't have to decide by a certain point, but I wouldn't be surprised if yet this spring or early in the summer, we would know whether or not it's a done deal. They let the Court of Appeals decision stand, or they're going to decide to take it up and reconsider all the merits of the case and come to a conclusion either for or against the standing appellate court decision.
All right, and another kind of update for everyone, we've covered the sales and use tax exemption, and now that is official. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so good news. We actually had one go through the process and come out in a way that we were happy with. This was an issue with sales and use tax, so the 6% sales tax, and whether or not it should be applied to delivery and installation services. And this was an issue going back, really started in 2019. Treasury became much more aggressive in implementing this just administratively. There's no change in law at that point, but so it's been, that process has been, taxpayers and Treasury have been battling it out in court. Legislation has now passed, and that legislation more explicitly exempts or gives the conditions under which the delivery and installation of things like furniture, for example, whether or not that is to be taxed. And under this circumstance, it has to be accounted for separately in the billing, but it wouldn't be on the invoice, but it wouldn't be taxed. And the governor signed that. Now, we thought that was a done deal a month ago when it first passed the House of Representatives, and the governor had indicated that she would sign it, but it was held up in the Senate for a little while. Eventually, though, the Senate did go ahead and pass it. The House affirmed the bill and sent it on to the governor, and the governor signed it. So we do have one in the win column. Those have been kind of hard to come by this year, but one in the win column when it comes to resolving a tax issue. Now, it was described, and I saw some press releases and some coverage on it, described as a tax cut. We really don't see it that way. We see it as maintenance of the system as it existed pre 2019. And thankfully, it does address those. Treasury had done some assessments, some pretty big tax assessments on small businesses that in good faith weren't collecting sales and use taxes from their customers on the delivery and installation portion of the sales transaction. So it resolves those outstanding cases as well. So big relief for those businesses that were wrapped up in the middle of it. But moving forward, we look at this as preservation of a really important point, which in Michigan, we have a sales tax that applies to things. When I bought this phone, it was, a sales tax was collected on it. That's a thing. I could touch it as tangible. Services, we don't tax services here. There are a few exceptions to that rule, but in this case, it maintains that distinction that, if you buy furniture, the furniture that you buy is subject to sales tax, but the installation and delivery of that furniture is not.
All right, let's switch topics here a little bit. The United Way issued their ALICE report this week. So what is this ALICE report, and then what did we learn?
We're all used to hearing about the poverty threshold, and then there's there's certain government programs that you can qualify for to 125% of poverty or 150% of poverty. And that's an important measure, and it's a measure that is paid close attention to and updated and examined throughout each year. So the United Way had come up with a different measure, though, which is people that aren't necessarily in poverty, but ALICE, ALICE, is an acronym. It stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. So people with limited assets and limited income compared to just what it costs to make it in life, but still employed. So that they call it the ALICE population. And they did an update to their report for all 50 states. And in Michigan, it does show that that ALICE population increased since the pandemic. So it got bigger since the pandemic. Michigan is already, there's two ways of looking at this. The increase in our ALICE population was kind of middle of the pack compared to other states, but we are, in terms of the total number and the overall standing of Michigan in terms of the proportion of our population that's in that category, we're in the bottom portion of states. So to give you some idea of the gravity that we're talking about here, it's about 39% of households in 2021. So this would be at the end of 2021. So it includes the 2020 and the 2021 economic performance. And by the way, it does include that that a lot of these families did receive government assistance. So even after receiving government assistance, the pandemic-related government assistance, that these households, the number of households falling under that asset limited, income constrained, but still employed threshold, the ALICE threshold, increased. It increased by more than 62,000 households. So it's 39% total fall under that. So that would be ALICE and poverty. If you look at the total amount, it's about 1.5 million that fall under the threshold. About 1 million of them are above poverty, but under that higher ALICE threshold. And then about 500,000 are fit that federal definition of under the poverty line. So I think it was, on the one hand, it's not terribly surprising, but what was a bit surprising to me was that given the child tax credits and the payments and things that were made with respect to pandemic experience or pandemic assistance, that even after a pretty robust suite of services and supports, we still had families fall under that threshold. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, on that is that rising costs kind of work against the population. So even when income goes up, if the cost of living goes up more, then more families fall under that, because this is basically a measurement of the income that is needed to get by with the kind of average or standard of an average standard of living. And so if housing prices are going up, if food prices are going up, if energy and gasoline, fuel costs, transportation costs are going up, then it's gonna push that income threshold up, and therefore more people fall below it.
All right, let's talk about the automotive industry now. In a kind of a big move, Stellantis is offering voluntary buyouts to about 33,000 or more people across the US. So this really does kind of speak to big changes in this industry, right?
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons why I'm a little nervous for Michigan and kind of this, pushing all the chips in on automotive production, because like we do have a lot of automotive production jobs already, but it's like 13% of our population that are in production related, not just automotive, but production related jobs. There was a time when it was a third of our population, about 36%, back around the time that I was born. And so it's not that production is going down, it's just that there's so much automation, and the number of people that you need to produce things keeps on going down. But now, as we're making this big leap from combustible engines to electrification, just the number of parts, and therefore the number of people, the number of companies that are in the supply chain, all of that is likely to condense more in the future. And as automotive companies seek to shift their investment and resources, this is a big risk that we have. Now, when Stellantis announced this, the scale of it was pretty surprising, that it was 31,000 production-related jobs, 2,500 salaried positions. So 33,500 are offered voluntary buyouts. And so that would be permanent end to those positions as people take those buyouts. That's nationwide. That's not just in Michigan, but of course, Stellantis, formerly Chrysler, has a pretty big footprint in Michigan. So I think it stands to reason that this proportionately could have a pretty big impact. It was not received well from the new UAW president, as you might imagine, Shawn Fain. I made note of his quote here. He said the company was, quote, to push to cut thousands of jobs while raking in billions in profits is disgusting. So clearly not happy with that type of move. But this is, I think that we're going to see more of this when it comes to this industry, as they move away from the parts and labor intensive combustible engines to electrification. And this is, I'm afraid, just the first of future dominoes.
All right, let's talk about budget. We issued our set of budget priorities and recommendations alongside a business group coalition that we're a part of. And I'll go ahead and share those in the comments. And Brian, I'll let you give an overview.
Yeah, we have other organizations that we work with whenever we can to just team up with, both our priorities in our policy shop with other business organizations and like-minded organizations to just combine and speak into the system. There's a group of business associations, some have called the Big Six, that includes SBAM, along with the Michigan Manufacturers Association, Michigan Chamber, the Grand Rapids Chamber, Detroit Regional Chamber, and Business Leaders for Michigan. Those 6 organizations really have worked together to establish and communicate into the appropriation system. It's the budget season right now at the state of Michigan, what the business priorities are. And this is outside of the general education system, which obviously we care a lot about, and infrastructure, fixing roads, transportation budget. But really zeroing in on talent, workforce development, and then housing is two areas that we've got a lot of alignment with other business organizations and some asks. So the Going Pro Talent Fund, which is skilled trades training, allows businesses to band together and receive some support in training, upskilling businesses, working with community colleges to do that. Also to create what's called Fast Track, and this would be a one-stop shop for all the different economic development programs, that, especially the talent programs that the state has. There's more than people even know about, and like this idea of having that consolidation, one-stop shop, creating this type of customer service platform within state government is something that all the business organizations were pretty interested in. We also, we've seen enough success in the Reconnect program, which is adults going back to school to get an associate's degree or other credential and to receive state support in doing that. There's accountability standards and conditions have to be met, but generally tuition free for people to go back. Right now it's age 25 and above, and there's been a lot of great interest and some strong enrollment, and well, we just need more people that are able to do more things out there in the economy. So we're supporting an effort to, instead of having 25 be the place where you qualify, to have it be 21, and that age 21, and then a separate near completer fund, which some of our studies show that there's a lot of people out there that are really close to having a credential, certificate, or degree, and to really help them just get that last piece. And sometimes it's not like a tuition issue, there's just something else happened in life, sidetracked a person, they never got back to it. It's just, as we look for overall development in business development, when some of the more high profile deals that kind of walked away from Michigan, usually it's because there just weren't enough people here, just flat out not enough people, but also not enough people with the right skills or credentials. And so this, moving people up that economic ladder actually creates a much more effective and compelling case for expansions of business of all sizes in Michigan. And then there's a STEM forward internship program. The idea here is to try to capture more of those that are going to college in Michigan, to have internships where they're putting career roots down while they're in college, and studies show that we have a better chance of retaining that talent if they put some career roots down while they're getting their education. So those are some of the talent programs that we're supporting and would look for the state to really prioritize. In addition to a lot of the existing work that they do, many of those things are in some stage already happening in state government, but looking to just take the next step with them, and some are new. Housing is the other one. Housing has come up as a pretty big issue in several parts of our state, where we're even seeing some businesses that are creating housing solutions for themselves or for their employees, because they're having such a hard time attracting talent in when there's just no place for people to live. SBAM is involved with the Michigan State Housing Development Authority in support of the statewide housing strategic plan. There's a few things though that we would zero in on. First is zoning and land use grants for municipalities that really need to rethink what the density that they allow to make housing more affordable for the workforce. It's just there's housing expenses have gone way up, and there's a lot of zoning and land use issues that make it difficult to build that middle level housing. So we're not talking about low income housing, but really the middle income housing. And then some affordable housing for low income housing tax credits to really lean in. There's already a system for that, but to lean into that more. One of the programs we're really excited about is called the Missing Middle. And this is an opportunity it's on the supply side of things. So it's an incentive for the development of housing for middle income people. And it's not like a subsidy that you give to a middle income person to go afford a house. It's an incentive for developers, and they don't have to be professional developers. It could be one-off. Anybody watching this right now could potentially qualify for missing middle funding up to $70,000 per unit. And the catch is that the end user, either buyer or renter of the property, has to be between 60 and 120% of the average median income of the county that it's located in. And that's a pretty wide range and a pretty big size market. So we like that at the supply side. There's a lot of demand side housing support out there, but it doesn't necessarily solve the problem of there's not enough supply, especially at price points where people have kind of average or middle incomes. And then there's another one called Safe and Healthy Homes. There's we have one of the oldest housing stocks in America. That's one of the things about just the Industrial Revolution in Michigan, heritage and history of home ownership. It's one of our competitive advantages. You know, small businesses more often than not start in homes, and home ownership is actually it creates a great ecosystem for entrepreneurship, and early stage companies. But the housing stock is quite old, and so there's within the MISTA strategic housing plan is support for renewing existing housing stock to revitalize and get it back on get it more toward the newer functional side. So again, a supply side effort there, and to just increase the supply of housing that's out there. There's it is kind of an awkward economic time, but the state is still, in terms of just, are we heading into a recession? What's happening with the housing market? But the state is actually still in a really strong financial position that in a few years that will be different. But what I like about these programs and the things that we're pushing for, the sort of things that create sustainable future opportunities. So like if we renew and have more housing stock, that will pay dividends for our state for the next 50 years. If we upskill the population to the point where they're more competitive in a increasingly competitive global economy, then that's the sort of thing where even if the state is unable to maintain that level of activity in the future, it's not like the benefit of what we've done are doing during these years goes away. So some of the spending priorities, we actually don't usually weigh in heavily on government spending, other than we want to make sure that it's not growing out of control, and then they come knocking on small businesses' door to pay higher taxes. In this case, though, housing and talent development seem to be some natural places where we had good alignment with the Big Six, and so we had put that together, and happy for all of our members. You see the link that is shared there. You can take a look at each of these things, and if you happen to run into your local state senator or state representative in the coming month, they'll be voting on budgets and just weighing in and saying, hey, here's some priorities that would on balance be very good for small business and the environment that we operate in. The voice of small business makes a really big difference when it comes to public policy makers who they hear from a lot of people, make sure they hear from small business too.
Speaking of legislators and public policy, you gave a what I thought was a really excellent overview of several proposals that would be problematic for small businesses on Monday's show. And we did create a document that outlines those in a little more detail. We'll share that link, but I didn't know if you wanted to give a quick overview of those here as well.
Yeah, so if what I've done is to just do a plain English write-up of each of these pieces of legislation that I think are particularly harmful to small businesses, and you can go through and see which of them sound like they would impact your business more. I would encourage you to do what we're doing at the Small Business Association of Michigan. Is we are approaching legislators. We're going over these pieces of legislation, and it's not a pounding the fist on the table type of a situation. It's really to try to help them understand that, hey, here's a proposal, and at the press release when this got introduced said one thing, but I want to explain to you how this affects small businesses and why it's bad for small businesses, the future small businesses, and their success in Michigan. And so as you go through, there's, the bill limiting independent contractors is one that we have a top concern about. The predictive scheduling for retail, hospitality, and restaurants would be really untenable for the businesses that would fall under that. And then the extending unemployment benefits at a time when there's 7 job seekers for every 10 jobs that are open, and a couple of bills that require disclosure of employees' salaries to other employees, and that could really cause a lot of chemistry issues and team issues within smaller organizations. A lot of these things, they might, in the context of like a ginormous corporation, they might not, like they have grades and salaries fall into these very, specific, precisely defined responsibilities, and everything's published. And small businesses, it's way smaller enterprises usually operate as it's not so precisely defined in silos. Small businesses, everybody pitches in, everybody does what needs to be done in order for the organization to be successful. And there's some big problems with the practical ramifications of these proposals. And I think in the context of just saying, hey, here's what this would mean in my business, here's the problem that it would cause to my business, could be very influential. And so I'd encourage you to take a look at the summary that we put together. And then and as you talk to people, please let us know too, like, hey, I ran into my legislator, or I called them, or I emailed them, and here's what they said. And that would just help us kind of keep track of where things are at. We'll be doing the same thing. And our hope is that over the course of the coming months that we can get these put on the back burner and move on to more productive and positive things.
All right. I want to end by letting everyone know that we have opened registration and announced our keynote speaker for the SBAM annual meeting and Small Business Summit. This is really a fantastic day. It's our premier event of the year. And it's June 15th from 8 a.m. until 2 p.m. at the Lansing Center. Your ticket gets you access to express learning sessions, networking, the exhibit hall, luncheon, and then our keynote presentation. This year, our speaker will be McKeel Haggerty. He's the CEO of Haggerty. They began as a niche insurance agency in Traverse City for collector cars, and now they're actually the world's largest membership organization for car lovers. So he's going to share a story about his family business. He started it. His parents started it in their basement, Brian, to your point about businesses starting in homes. And now it's a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange. So visit sbam.org/annual meeting, check it out. And we do hope that you'll join us on June 15th.
You're not going to want to miss it. This is McKeel Haggerty is a very dynamic and impressive person. The company has been just what's happened over the last generation in that business has been pretty incredible. And so this, our theme, which is the evolution of business, like, that growth and what it took to grow, and how they operate, what's changed, what hasn't changed. I just think it's going to be really insightful and also inspirational for small businesses who aspire to grow.
Absolutely. So sbam.org/annual meeting. Have a great rest of your week. We'll be back here on Monday.
Thanks, everybody. See you on Monday.